Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Dr. Charles McMillan. He is Professor of Strategic Management and International Business at York University. Talking about Canada-Japan, love to get back onto what you were saying just before the break about some of the examples of how this relationship should be managed better.
Well, to give you a specific example, I could give two, Nortel, where they got huge contracts but couldn't deliver with the quality standards required in Japan. But the other is Canadian Pacific. Management of Canadian Pacific has taken the Pacific out of the word. And Canadian Pacific has a long history in Asia, not only with sailing ships and whatever, not only with Hong Kong, Japan, and even India. But for all intents and purposes, the Pacific has been taken out of Canadian Pacific. That's an example of huge mistakes and a lack of an understanding of how slowly, over the last 30 years, and I'm not blaming anybody in particular, slowly, we have to have a global mindset. A lot of our companies, don't forget, take Bombardier, its main competitor came from Brazil. Sudbury, nickel, its main competitor was Russia. So sometimes your competition comes from unlikely sources, and we do live in a global world. So we need people in the private sector, business associations, unions, universities, the public service, to focus on the global mindset and then zero in on particular countries for particular reasons.
How would you describe, we've been talking about some of the challenges, and fair enough. What are Canada's strengths that should be put to better use, perhaps, when it comes to these trade relationships?
Well, you've traveled a lot, and you were in government and all that. One thing and I've traveled more than most people, the one huge strength of Canada is the Canada brand. We are seeing in the most diverse places in Central Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, in China, in Russia, for our values, our multicultural outlook. We're a bilingual country. They just look at Canada, and more importantly, Canada is something that the British aren't, or the French aren't, or the Americans aren't. Whether it's their past, the history, colonial, or whatever you want to call it. And a lot of countries look at Canada as a voice to do certain things. And in these complicated issues, whether it's climate change, whether it's energy policy, food production today, Canada has a voice, part of the G7 or whatever, but close linkages with certain countries that other countries are trying to get involved with. And that's why I think the Canada brand is something we're not exploiting. The word soft power is a buzzword to describe that. But that is a really important fact. I understand hard power and economic and military, being the predominant things. But soft power is another factor as well. And that's where young people in sports and the Olympics and these kinds of issues create and extend soft power. And to be honest about it, the British and the French are very good at this.
Yes. I mean, this comes back to the Olympics a little bit, because I've known when I was in government how Canada always had a business strategy at each Olympics that was not on our soil, even on our soil, I guess at the Vancouver Olympics, as a way to also advance our business interests, again, using that soft power. Do you see that happening in Tokyo at all?
Well, the Tokyo Olympics, there are three problems with the current Olympics. COVID being the obvious one. Second, it was postponed. And third, it's been very controversial within the country because Japan has been slow to bring out the vaccine rollout. Less than half of Japanese have the vaccine that Canada has. And we were slow, and I'm not blaming anybody of that. It was a supply problem, not a demand problem. But we're vaccinating people, and we don't have these scares that are taking place in the U.S. or whatever. I'm much more optimistic about the Olympics. But the Olympics in Japan, first of all, I've never been to a country where everybody's a sports nut. Lots of people love saying Canada ice hockey, but don't know much about a lot of other sports. The Americans like basketball, football, or whatever, but not so good in cricket or sumo wrestling or ice hockey. They are just crazy about sports.
Hold that thought, Charlie. We do have to take another break. I apologize.
Okay, sure.
Important point, so we will get right back to it after the break. Please stay with us.
No problem.